And we're live, everyone. Welcome. For those of you watching on the replay, you can fast forward about 15 minutes and we'll be getting started. This is the pre-show. It's the pre-show before the show, thus the pre. All right, let's do the check of the things. Here's one thing. Here's another thing. This is my screen that doesn't show the right thing on it, so let's fix that. Here's another thing, except my head's not in there. There's my head right here. That's what we wanted. And let's show actually something on this screen, shall we? Here we go. And my head is on that one, so it's alive. Well, that's good. That's promising. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Live study group chat is in the live event chat room. All right, what else? I got tweets will be going out a bit. Yes, this is how I look when I'm at the Daily Planet. This is not usually, I usually don't wear my glasses on a thing. Usually got my contacts in. No one will recognize me. I'm sitting in today for Professor Messer. He couldn't make it. Socrative is up. Let me flip to that slide. So those of you that want to prepare now can slide over to Socrative.com, open up a new window, go to the Professor Messer room, or download the app. The app. This is a application. It stands for app stands for. It's application that fits on a mobile device. What we used to call a telephone. And you can actually run the Socrative application from that. All right. Recordings are going. Got that going on. See, my Cylons are going down here. Here you go. They're recording. It's good. What else we got going on? Let's see. I can't see the Twitter there. Now I can kind of see it. Too many windows. I need just one more monitor and I'd be good. One more screen. And it would be perfect. All right. 11 minutes to go. Check. We need to do an audio check. Check test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's see what that sounds like if we were to listen in on the website with the thing. Let's minimize these so I can actually see what's going on. And I'm not saying anything yet. Or am I? Oh, wait. On the website with the thing. Aha, there we go. See, it's important to have the channel turned on. It's the little things that will come in handy and important later on when I take phone calls. Kind of hard to take phone calls if I can't hear the phone calls. Can't hear them. Okay. What else? I see some of you are in Socrative already. Sneak peek before we get started. How about that, huh? Right on, right on. Okay. We should have the tweets and Facebooks and Google Pluses and emails go out in about 4 minutes. I like to wait to the very last minute, 5 minutes beforehand. Then we do a thing. I'll put myself in busy mode here. Maybe that will help me with the myriad chats. All right. It all appears to be in order. And working. So we've got the show started there. We've got this piece here. That's all good there. All right. We're in good shape. See, we're ready. I have a warm beverage. Got my vocal zone in. Trying to get rid of that in the next 3 minutes. I think I've managed to do it. Okay. So now I think we're in good shape. I think now it's just a matter of getting this thing together and going. How's my background? I haven't even checked. Is there junk in the background? There's not. I've managed to keep the entire set pristine for a week. Usually I take this big panel that is in front of me that handles the video switching. I usually stick it back there, so it's kind of in the shot, but it can't be in the shot because I move it here, obviously. That's really the only thing I ever put over there. I try to keep everything kind of the way it is, but it's a working set, so there's stuff in that cabinet. There are things. So I have to make sure I don't mess things up over there. I should move something around every time. So you'd have to kind of figure out what's different. But I'm in the middle of shooting A+ videos, so I want everything to be at least consistent. Somewhat consistent. Somewhat. Yeah, let's not go crazy. All right. The digital Rubik's Cube is not as usable as you might think it would be because it doesn't turn. You kind of have to scrape your hand over it. It's annoying, really. Because I'm used to, clunk, 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 boom. You can't do that. It's not for speed. It's for looks. But it was a gift. It was a very nice gift. And I really should turn it on. Just because it does make colors. It does have a nice demo mode, and it does a lot of colors and goes through the cubing of it. And then it turns off after like 5 minutes, which would be nice if it just stayed on. A little thing in the background that was always changing color. You can barely even see it because of my mic. And the shot, there it is. Usually my mic's right about there, so you can't even see it. I should move it so it's actually visible. All right. 2 seconds, 1 second, and let's see if we get emails and tweets and other things sent out. Did it? Did it send it? Did it send it? Did I even post one? Really is the... I think I did. Let's see. I may not have. Because there's a lot going on right now. There's one way to find out. You go to Twitter and you find out, what am I doing in Twitter? What's happening? That's what it's asked. It asked me what was happening. So it didn't send one. So I didn't queue one. It's hard to keep track. Let's queue one, shall we? My live Network Plus study group starts right now. I'm putting this into Buffer, which is buffer.com. So it's where I do all of my automated social networking postings. Join us here. And then I can put professormesser.com/live. And stick it out to everything and share. Meow. There it goes. So there it is, and it worked, and it tweeted, and it did the thing. So now people know. Now it's not a mystery. What else do I have up here? I had something else. Oh yeah. Let's get rid of this. Quit that. Let's put this up. That's working. Oh, all the things. Yeah, Germany can't block the visuals. They probably would if they could. I mean, everybody can. If I used visuals that were copyrighted in some way, they could take it down with copyright, a DMCA takedown. Don't get me started with copyright infringements and the craziness associated with that. All right. How are we doing on this? Let's see if people are actually making it into the chat room, and they are. Welcome, everyone. It's like most of us are at low resolution. Not a lot of us at 720. There are a few. There's a good chunk at 720. Half of us really are running at HD. And actually more people running at 360p than 720. Isn't that interesting? No, it's not even 720, is it? Yeah, it is. It's hard to see on my teeny little screen. Is it? Let's see if I can even show you what I'm seeing. Yeah. So here's my little analytics showing me total number of people who are on, and then shows me the highest number of people are in the 360 stream. But we haven't really started yet. Usually everything kicks in when I start jabberjawing. Everyone always comes in 5 minutes late. That's how it always works. All right. Now, let's put this chat where I can see it a little better. And I think we're ready to go. I think we might do something today. I have good questions today. I think they're good questions. Okay, they're awful questions. I have awful questions. No, they're fine. We'll see how they turn out. I spent a little bit of time working on questions. It usually takes about 3 to 4 hours of prep for this in different ways. Making the questions is the biggest prep. That's the big one. Not hard, just time consuming, not difficult. Just a lot of things you have to think about when I'm making these questions. All right. And with that, I think it is time to do a study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2015 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. This is our monthly study group. Welcome back to another month of questions and answers and open phone lines and people in the chat and things that we're doing on the website and so much more. We've got a lot to go through today, and I'll be stepping through all of these questions and answers with you, and we'll figure this out as we go along. There's quite a bit that is going on, in fact. As you know, on the website, professormesser.com, all of my videos, all of my training courses are available to watch absolutely free. And if you can also get offline versions of them, professormesser.com/getnetplus. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter and on YouTube by going to professormesser.com/Twitter/YouTube/Google+/Instagram/one of those things, and it gets you there. How difficult can that be? Also want to remind you, you can get 10% off any of your CompTIA vouchers by going to professormesser.com/vouchers. So there's quite a few places you can go once we're done with this study group today. To remind you, the offline version of my course has all of my videos on it. They're all closed captioned. They're in 1080p. My Network Plus course, probably the nicest looking course, because it's the first one I've created in full HD 1080p, which is really nice. Everything going forward. Should we do a 4K course? I'm not sure. I'm not sure anyone wants to see me in 4K. We'll find out. I also include MP3 files with this. So if you buy my course, you can also have the MP3 files to listen to while you're in your car or on the train or wherever you're going, and you have an audio to listen to. I also sell those separately if you want to buy those separately. And my course notes, of course, are included with this. So if you've thought, I would like the course notes, but I need the videos as well, everything's in a single package for you. You can find out about this, professormesser.com/getnetplus. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm going to be asking questions of you. I'm watching the chat room that's on my website. So if you're watching this on YouTube and it's live, you can pop over to professormesser.com/live and not only get the video, but also get the chat, because we get to talk back and forth there throughout this. But of course, you're also able to answer the questions live during this event. Now, if you're watching this on the replay, you won't be able to participate in the live answering of questions on Socrative. But if you are here live, go to Socrative.com, pop open a new window, and go to the login or click the student login. And then you'll want to put in a room name of Professor Messer, all one word, spelled this way, PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it right. Or you'll be in the wrong room and no one will be there. And you'll be sitting in a room by yourself. It will be so lonely. Don't do that. You can also download the apps. So whether you're on a Windows device, an Android device, an iOS device, you're in the Chrome browser. There's even an app, an extension you get to log onto your Chrome browser. You can participate there as well. If you go through this process and you've put in the right name for the room, you will end up with a question like this that says, how long have you been studying for your Network Plus certification? And then you'll be able to answer the question. And when you answer the question, it will look something like this, or at least you'll see that you've answered the question. I see it looking like this because you have some options: less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, 9 months to a year, over a year, or I already have my Network Plus certification. So 52% of us have been working on our Network Plus for less than 3 months. So you probably got interested in this when the Network Plus was updated to the N10006. We'll talk about that in a moment. Those of you may be in classes. So you've just started the classes trying to get through your Network Plus side of it. In any case, you're now here, and we're going to ask some questions of you and see how you do. Now, you can also notice people like me that take a long time. 7% of us have been studying for this Network Plus for over a year. This is me. It takes me a long time to internalize this information. I have other things going on, so it takes me a long time to get that certification study done. And that's a very good place to go. If you're people like me, to spend over a year studying for certification, not unusual. I would say probably the average is between 3 to 6 months. That's probably a pretty good average. And indeed, you can see here that we are in there as well. So obviously you're in Socrative now. You're trying out these types of things. That's very good to be able to have that capability there, because I'm going to go through and really ask some very specific questions of you today in this study group. The N10006 is an exam that is relatively new. It was released on February 28th of this year. So it's really about 6-7 months old at this point. There's usually an update about every 3 years, which means the older N10005 that came out in 2011 for English-speaking test takers, it has been retired. You can't take the N10005 any longer on the English-speaking exam. The English exam does not provide you or it's expired. You don't even have the choice. The only exam you can take if you want to take the exam in English is the N10006. So we've made the transition at the end of August. If you are someone who does plan on taking a non-English version, you technically could still take the N10005 until the end of this calendar year. So that would be until December the 31st. And it's not 2016, it's 2015. That slide is completely wrong on the international versions. So just ignore what I put there. The important part is that whether you take and pass the 005 or the 006, you get exactly the same certification. So for most of us here in the United States, in Canada, if you're watching this and you're understanding what I'm saying, then you're probably going to be taking the English version of the exam. The N10006 is really your only choice. Make sure you download the N10006 exam objectives because that's the exam you will be taking. So let's do some questions. You've gotten really good at the Socrative. So I'm going to, on my side, click and you will see the Socrative question will change to a question like this. Which of these devices operate at OSI Layer 2? Pick two of them. So this is something where you're going to pick more than one. So go to Socrative.com, click Student Login. Don't answer in the chat room. No answering there. Don't do that. Don't Google it. Stop Googling. We're going to try this like we're sitting down at the exam, and we're going to go through this to see which one of these could it possibly be. So you can see I have some options for you. It's not just to fill in the blank. There is router, proxy, switch, file server, bridge, and hub. Two of these operate at OSI Layer 2. It has that pick two right at the top. That's something you do have to watch out for in your exam. There will be questions where you have to answer multiple choices. Usually they'll have a checkbox. So it's different than the radio button where you're just choosing a single button. That'll be your visual cue that there must be more than one answer to this particular question. And if you try to answer only one and it is asking for more, it does actually tell you, or the one I took does actually tell you that. I'm thinking it probably still does the same thing. But look for the visual cue. Read the questions. That's the important part. If it says to pick two, you should pick two of those. So this is one where I thought I would just start off with an OSI question. One of the largest groups of questions that people would like to have when they fill out the little form when you're registering for this. I ask you, what is the one question you would like to see asked? And very large, probably one of the top three is on OSI. So I thought it would be good. Let's talk about OSI then. Let's do an OSI question. And specifically one around Layer 2, I think fits pretty well because I wanted to give you an option to answer at least more than one of these. So really understand what's happening at Layer 2 of the OSI model. We were having a conversation in the chat room this week that and I get emails about this. Why are we talking about the OSI model? It's just a model. We never use this in normal IT speak during the day. And I just came from a company where I worked 7 years at a network security company. We talked OSI model every day because that's the way you explain to people, how does this device work? What information are we looking at when it's communicating from point A to point B? At what level is it communicating? Is that a Layer 2 communication? Is it a Layer 3 communication? Does it go up into Layer 7? Where does it fit this information? That's very valuable information to know. And if you're all talking at the same time, at the same level about the same thing. And that's one of the values that you really get from the OSI model. Let's see how we did. Which one of these devices operate at OSI Layer 2? Well, let's choose the top two that we've got here. You can see 44% said switch, 29% said bridge, but 14% said hub. There's double digits there. And then it goes down pretty quick. Router, proxy, and file server only got single digits on this one. So OSI Layer 2, which ones are these? There were two options here to choose from, and I realized the percentages don't really match because we're choosing two of these, but those two top were switch and bridge. So are those really the top two, or did hub somehow figure into this scenario? Well, let's look at OSI Layer 2. Layer 2 is called the data link layer. This is where devices communicate really at the hardware level of things, being able to communicate back and forth. So if you think of this from an Ethernet perspective, we would communicate at the OSI Layer 2 at the physical Ethernet address level. And in Ethernet, that's called the MAC address. Now, if you're on a WAN connection, It may be a data link control address, to a very literal layer 2 address called a DLC address. But for Ethernet, we always refer to that as the MAC address, the media access control address. This layer 2 view is really foundational. Everything communicates over the network at layer 2 at a bare minimum. You have to have some way to get the information from point A to point B. Some people also refer to this as the switching layer, because the MAC address on this Ethernet network is how the switches make forwarding decisions. Whenever it receives information coming in that's going to a destination MAC address, it tries to figure out where on the switch that particular device is, and it sends that particular piece of information out that port. So it's very specific on how it's providing that information. Now, I don't have it on this slide, but switches are a new way of communicating by making forwarding decisions based on a MAC address. Another device that makes a forwarding decision based on a MAC address is a bridge. So if we were to look at the top 1 and 2 in this list, switch certainly is a layer 2 device. It operates at OSI layer 2. A bridge also operates at OSI layer 2. So if you answered C, the 45 options, 45% of the responses were switch and 29% were bridge. If you answered those two, you got it absolutely correct. A hub communicates at really OSI layer 1. It is a physical repeater of information. There's not a lot of intelligence in a hub. It doesn't even make forwarding decisions. The really only decision it makes is if data comes in one interface, it sends that same information out every other interface on the device. There's no thought process or forwarding decision to be made at all. There is no decision. Sends it out to every interface. A router is an OSI layer 3 device because it makes forwarding decisions based on IP address, and an IP address is up at layer 3 of the OSI model. A proxy and a file server are generally considered to be layer 7 application layer type of devices. I guess it depends on the type of proxy you're using, but in most people's minds and the way that they use proxies, it would be OSI layer 7. So that is how we came across OSI layer 2 being the switch C and the bridge E. Looks like most of us got that one absolutely right. Good job. Let's do another one. Let's move on to another question about something that is not the OSI layer. Sorry, there's no OSI model question here. We'll have to give you another one later on with the OSI. I'll just give you a warning now. Maybe, maybe not. This one is around something called RSTP. Which of these would best describe RSTP? So now we have to know what in the world RSTP happens to be. So is RSTP, which one of these would best describe it? Quickly converge the network, gather performance metrics from remote devices, globally manage remote access points, perform secure file transfers, enable enterprise authentication on access points, or none of the above. So that would be a really good way to figure out what RSTP happens to be. So we do need to figure that one out. What that happens to be on this view of P. It would be good if you started with what RSTP would be, and then we go from there. Questions in the chat room about the OSI model. NIC was not the answer. Network interface card was not an answer because they operate at layer 1 and layer 2. Network interface card, I don't think was one of the answers, was it? Did I have it up there as an answer? A network interface card is a layer 1 device. It is not a layer 2 device, although they do have MAC addresses, but we don't really think of them as that. So that's one of the ways that I don't think I put network interface card. If you read some books, they will put a network interface card at layer 1. Other books put it at layer 2. Other books put it at layers 1 and 2. But we can all fight about that one. It is a model, and it depends on how you're interpreting those particular layers as to where those devices go. As you can see with that question, there was no question about that because I didn't have that as one of the answers. Don't believe I did anyway. So no Googling. Stop Googling RSTP. I can feel it as you're doing it. We want to be able to answer this as if we are sitting right in front of the exam and getting this question and now having to answer this particular question. You probably wouldn't get a question that's quite this obvious on the exam. The exam tends to be more along the lines of giving you more specific scenarios. But that's not the point of this. This is a study group. I'm not trying to duplicate or emulate an exam question, although if we happen to in the midst of this, that's fine. But we're trying to get these thoughts and ideas down in our brains so that we understand what they happen to be. We want to make mistakes now so that we don't make mistakes on the actual exam. So let's see how we did with RSTP. Okay, that's the kind of question I like, where we just have no idea what this might be. We are all over the place. Well, let's see. We have one that is the highest, 28%. It says quickly converge the network, and then we got a tie for second, really. Gathering performance from metrics from remote devices, globally managed remote access points, performing secure file transfers, enterprise authentication access points, and none of the above are basically tied for this. Now, this is one of these things that will be useful to know. RSTP. RSTP also stands for 802.1W, and it stands for Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. That's what the R in STP. RSTP, Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. No mentioning in the chat room till I do. You got to think about that one. As the name implies, having spanning tree protocol is great. It prevents loops on your network. It's a method of switches being able to talk to each other so that you can create a redundant network that doesn't implode onto itself. Very common and easy way to do this. I have an entire video on spanning tree. There is one challenge with spanning trees protocol, though, is that the convergence time can take quite a bit of time. It could take as much as 30 seconds, sometimes even longer, depending on the spanning tree and how you're using it, up to 60 seconds. So you now have these challenges with spanning tree protocol that if you do lose a switch or a connection, there may be a delay before the network gets running again. And it doesn't take long for people to get on the phone and call you and say the network is down. So we needed a faster way to converge the network. So we came up with Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. So instead of going from this 30 to 50 seconds of convergence, we are now 6 seconds as a maximum amount of time that it would take for your network to converge. And for most people, they wouldn't even realize that there was a problem unless they were using some type of real-time protocol like a telephone conversation. You would tell if the telephone conversation blacked out for 6 seconds. But at least it's not 50 seconds. And that is the point with RSTP, is that it's fast. And usually it's much faster than even 6 seconds. So there are some real advantages to do this. This is backwards compatible, though, so you can have both 802.1D, which is the old legacy traditional STP, and you can have RSTP. RSTP recognizes there's some older devices that may not know this newer way of converging. The process is almost identical. There was very few changes in the overall idea behind the convergence used in RSTP. So if you understand spanning tree protocol now, you'll be able to pick up the rapid spanning tree protocol and understand the differences pretty well. And this is where you really do have to think about where this is coming from and how you're using this. And as those in the chat room are noticing, this is a bit of a new topic. And this is one that is on the N10006. So you do have to know RSTP on the newer exam. You need to know both spanning tree protocol and rapid spanning tree protocol for the N10006. So make sure you have a look and understand how this works. In one of my videos, I do provide you with a kind of a diagram, an animation of how spanning tree works overall, so you can get a feel for that. That might be a good reference point to go back and have a look. So let's see how we did with this one. So rapid spanning tree protocol is a way to quickly converge the network. If there's an outage on the network's able to reconfigure itself and allow the traffic to pass very, very quickly. So 29% of you got this one. Absolutely correct. The rest that are gathering performance from remote devices, that's more like SMTP or SNMP. SMTP is the male. SNMP would be a good way to gather performance metrics from remote devices, or even syslog. Globally managed remote access points and performing secure file transfers, enabling enterprise authentication has nothing to do with the spanning tree protocol. And certainly none of the above, because it is indeed A. If you answered A, quickly converge the network. Absolutely correct. Well done. Well, let's move away from the spanning tree protocol and move into something else, something that would be a little bit different than spanning tree protocol. But of course, I can't just tell you what it is. I have to give you an abbreviation. And the abbreviation we're dealing with here is SDN. Which of these would best describe an SDN? And again, I've given you a list of things to be able to break down what the differences might be. Your choices are: changes can be made dynamically. It will not operate without a high-speed network infrastructure. Changes are often made without any human intervention. Devices must support jumbo frames. There is block-level access to storage devices, or real-time applications are not compatible with an SDN. So which of these would best describe an SDN, or more accurately, which two of these would best describe an SDN? So go to Socrative.com. Pop open a new window there and go out to that website, to the student login, to the Professor Messer room. No mentioning in the chat room what these things happen to be. We have to figure that out on our own. In the chat room about the previous question, Lewis M3 says, is there a difference in the frames between STP and RSTP? Well, the protocols are slightly different. It's not the same thing, just faster. There are minor changes between those two. So RSTP is a completely new standard over STP, completely updated, but it's a minor change. So a lot of the things that you will see in the RSTP standard are named and work identically to the STP. So you'll be very familiar with the process. If you understand STP, it'll be very similar to that on the RSTP side. But they are different. They work differently. They act differently. It's different information that's in the frames that are going over the network. Absolutely, to be able to work with that. So that's one of those that you do have to think about and being able to work through that. The challenge with putting up any switched infrastructure is that you want to avoid any loops, because switches have no way to recognize a loop and remove information from the network if it is looping. And that's the primary reason we have STP and RSTP, is to prevent those loops. So that's a useful thing to do. But the question on the point right now is SDN. Which of these would best describe an SDN? I can see a number of us really thinking this one through. Not everybody's answered this one yet. They're still Googling. I asked you a question that would be very hard to Google, and this would indeed be it. Let's see what we've gotten so far. I think we've delayed this one long enough to see. Well, we've got two that have really popped up very clearly. Changes can be made dynamically, 39%. Changes are often made without any human intervention, is 35%. And then we've got single digits for everything else. SDN is certainly a term that we've heard a lot as of late, probably because it has become so popular in a very short period of time. The concept behind a software-defined network, and that is an SDN, is that the network is no longer just a box that you put a configuration on, and that's the way it works. Instead, we've created a series of layers to the network now, and at least we're splitting this up into two separate usable entities, or two separate types of planes within the device. One is the control plane and one is the data plane. So this is where you would separate really the functionality of these devices. Let's take a switch or a firewall or a router, and we can separate all of these in the same way. So you'd have a data plane, and the data plane is responsible for moving information in and out of the device. If it's a router, the data plane's doing the routing. If it's a switch, the data plane's doing the switching. If it is a firewall, the data plane's doing the firewalling. That's the piece that's really doing the hard work. Then you have the control plane. That is the human, or the interface that you would use, the human interface that you would use to get into that device. It can also be a non-human interface to that device as well, which is an important part to SDN. It's the way that you control that device. And notice, by separating these things out, it really doesn't matter what's going on the data plane, you can still control the device. In fact, they don't even technically have to be on the same physical component. You can have the control plane over on one device and the data plane on another. So there's the challenge of being able to do that. I must have said hello, hi Siri somewhere. We'll have to turn Siri down. The challenge, I think, with SDNs, though, is there's so many different aspects to them. They are, as they say in the SDN world, directly programmable, which means that you can configure these devices And the configuration process, because we split up the control plane, the data plane, is completely different than what's really going on with the actual forwarding of the data. Really useful to have that there too. Now we can split out these functions and be able to manage things a lot more independently than the data that's actually going through the network. These also have to be agile. Is what another term that's used in the software-defined networking world, because changes are happening all the time. And the changes are happening based on a number of different things. We think about adding a new switch or a new router when we want to change the infrastructure. But what if it's the end of the month and suddenly the network gets really busy? It would be great to spin up a bunch of new virtual servers, make sure those virtual servers have load balancing, that they have the proper protections with their firewalls, that they're able to route and switch properly. And it would be nice if we just click one button and have all of that happen. So we're able to do that because we're centrally managing them, and there is an orchestration. It's what it's called in the world of SDN, something that is able to programmatically configure and manage this process. So you don't have to have a human there. It can in fact be completely automated. If some process is getting very busy, have it recognize the process is getting busy, have it automatically spin up a new server in the virtual network, have it automatically provide the proper firewalls to protect the device, have it automatically add the correct switching and the correct routing, and have all of this happen without any human intervention. This is a capability that is already out here. We're already using this functionality. It's already in some of the larger data centers that are out there in the world. It is an open set of standards. There's a number of different standards. It tends to be more vendor neutral, though. The vendors are writing to these standards so that you can use anybody's technology, ideally, that complies with those standards and put them into your network. Because there's not one company that's providing operating systems and virtualization and firewalls and routers and switches. There's a lot that wish they were, but nobody's doing all of them. And as someone who's running a data center, you don't want your decisions to be made on one set of criteria. You want to be able to use whoever's product you'd like. And as long as they write to these open standards, the SDN works great. So that's why whenever we look at SDN and interpreting some of the functionality of SDN, changes being made dynamically, absolutely correct. And changes being made without any human intervention, that is absolutely a capability with these pieces. And it's really an interesting way that we see the evolution of networking, especially in large-scale environments and data centers. SDN is certainly something you should be aware of. So make sure that if you are getting into that world of things, the more you know about SDN, the more you're going to be able to keep up with what the latest technologies are, because they're already out there and they're already using them. If you ever hear somebody talking about Python and using Python as a scripting mechanism in their network, they're really leaning towards more of an SDN infrastructure because that's what most people will use. I've used other things as well. I've used Perl. I've used simple API calls. I've used C. There's many different ways to write to this interface and orchestrate things and automate it. But Python's a very common way to do that these days. So this is just a few of the things we need to know for our Network Plus exam. There's so much on the Network Plus exam. And as we've already seen, there are things on the Network Plus exam that maybe we didn't even realize. And what I've tried to do is take all of the pieces associated with the Network Plus exam, all of the detailed items that are in all of my videos, and I've put them all in one place. This may be something that you might want to use. So this doesn't replace your book. It doesn't replace the videos. It's something that you can use along with them. So instead of you making your own notes, I've already made them for you. So everything is in these course notes: subnetting details, protocols, the cabling. I've got a description of the different proxies, different topologies. It's all in here. I tried to make these course notes be something that you could easily flip through, see what's in the course notes. There's VPNs and the DHCP process, the DNS resolution process. There's the proxy information, NATing details, along with all of the different interfaces and cable types and things you might want to be able to use. This is a 15-page set of course notes. So if this is something you think you might want to be able to use, you can purchase the course notes at my website, professormesser.com/n-006-course-notes. I keep saying I'm going to make this much easier, aren't I? And I probably have. I just need to find out where that is, or just go to the main page of the Professor Messer website or anywhere along the top menus, and there are links to the Network Plus course notes. That is one that I think can be very useful. And at $10, it's a bargain. And you get something from your contribution. It's a way of keeping the website up and running, and it's very important. It is a very important way to contribute to the operation of the website as well. I want to thank everybody for helping to support me through the Network Plus course notes. There is quite a bit in there to go through. Before we get to the next question, I threw out some of the protocols that we were discussing earlier about managing an SDN, and people saying, well, what about all the other ones? What about fill in the blank? All of these different programming languages can be used for SDN. Probably not Java. Java may be in demand for other things, but not for software-defined network. Really, not much for anything these days. It's one of those types of programming languages that is rapidly losing its edge, probably because of just from a security perspective. It was never built for security, and now it's in a lot of places and causing a lot of insecurity. So it's not uncommon to see less of a demand for Java. I think its time is over. We're starting to see a decrease now to be able to do that. So that's why whenever I mention those protocols for SDN, you probably won't be using a lot. You could use Java for it. You could use any programming language as long as you write to the API of the software-defined network. But that's one of the challenges, is finding the right protocol, finding the right language for the job. And the one that's fit the best for SDN has tended to be Python. So that's one of the good examples of that. So let's shift our gears a little bit to another question I have for you. This one is dealing with something called an OTDR. And the question is, which of these would you be most likely to identify with an OTDR? So you're using an OTDR for something. It's got to be for one of these things. And the options are, would we use an OTDR to identify DB loss, next, a crossed pair, a T568A or 568B, or a split pair? Which of these would you be most likely to identify with an OTDR? If you think you know, don't put it in the chat room. Don't Google it. You should just go to Socrative.com and answer the question with those. Be able to do that. Very useful to have that there and those pieces. There's a lot to do around the idea of OTDRs. You're going to have to know that certainly for your Network Plus certification. So make sure that you go through and work with those things too. This is one that will be really useful for your Network Plus certification. If you aren't really sure what's on the Network Plus exam, make sure you go out to the exam objectives and download them. You can find the objectives on the CompTIA website, or you can simply type in professormesser.com/objectives, and I will redirect you right to the right place on the CompTIA website to download those, be able to use those. It is it's probably the most important thing that you can have for your exam, is knowing what's on the test. That's the thing we want to know, right? That's the question I get the most. What's on the test? It tells you in a great detail exactly what's on the test. That's one of the best ways to do it, is to go out to get those exam objectives. I think I even have the exam objectives up on my screen. Here's what they will look like whenever you start download or get them downloaded. Network Plus exam objectives in 10006, and tells you what's on there. So I flip down through this, you can see, tells you everything. Explain the functions and applications of various network devices: router, switch, multilayer switch, firewall, HIDS, IPS, IDS, access point, content filter. It's all in here. It's all there to be able to do that. There's also, in the chat room, guest 805 asked before I even had a chance, because if you go all the way through the document, at the very end, it lists the myriad set of acronyms that you need to know. And there are a lot in networking. They're all in here. So pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of acronyms. They're all in here. So if you're trying to figure it out, that may be a good place to go to figure out those pieces. Is your exam objectives. It has everything. And unfortunately, I'm even seeing today, I just read a note from someone who did not pass their Network Plus exam. And someone asked, well, what topics in the exam objectives did you have a problem with? He goes, what are you talking about exam objectives? He didn't even realize there was a list of things you have to know for your exam. And on that list is an OTDR. Let's see how we did with OTDRs. Well, which of these will we be most likely to identify with an OTDR? 59% said DB loss, but 19% said next. 14% said split pair. 11% said T568A or T568B, and 6% cross pair. So most of us said DB lost. So the DB loss really would be an interesting choice. Let's see if it's indeed what an OTDR would be able to tell us about. OTDR is an optical. O is for optical, and that should be the big clue when you're reading through questions like this that are asking about an optical time domain reflectometer. That is the TDR part of it. Time domain reflectometer is used to be able to identify problems on physical media. If it's a TDR, it identifies it on the piece that is copper. If it's an OTDR, it identifies these physical level problems on fiber, on the optical side. So that is one where when I start thinking through this and dealing with optical issues, that's where it would be. There's a good point in that. This is a very expensive device too. And when you're dealing with fiber at any level, it's a more expensive device than copper, certainly relatively speaking. It costs more. And that is why whenever you deal with OTDR, it's going to be something that you're going to be spending money, and you're probably going to be spending some additional training on this. Really, for both TDRs and OTDRs, you need that additional training. But these are very powerful tools at the physical level. If your physical device, if your physical media is not up to snuff, it's not up to the standard, then nothing is going to work over these links. So being able to use these tools and interpret them is going to be incredibly important. It's used primarily for certifying a cable plant for both copper and fiber. Obviously, the O is going to be on the optical side. So now let's see about this and figuring out those pieces. If we're dealing with optical, then we should be able to look at this list and look at any place where something might be used in an optical environment. Let's start at the bottom. A split pair is a copper network issue where we have split the pairs. They're using different pairs. We've effectively go on one side and we've split the pair on the other side. So that's copper. That's not going to be optical. It's not going to be an OTDR. T568A or 568B is a wiring standard for copper networks. So twisted pair copper networks, that doesn't apply here for the O. We know that crossed pair, again, a pair of copper cables is what we are crossing, so that would not apply. And near end crosstalk is when the copper cables themselves are able to hear what the other wires are doing effectively at the near end. So that is a copper type of problem. So the only thing here that really focuses on optical is the dB loss, the optical piece of this, OTDR dB loss, 49%. That's where you really get into these understanding how these tools operate is an important part of the Network Plus exam. If you answered A, dB loss, you got that one absolutely correct. In the chat room, everybody's still talking about programming and development, and people saying that, but wait, Java is still under great demand. I did not say that it was not, but I see its demand is diminishing rapidly with its myriad security problems. Nobody's doing new products on Java. The old ones are still there and have to be supported. I'm speaking specifically to software-defined networking and the most common uses, the most common languages that are used to integrate and orchestrate a software-defined network. Hopefully that'll give you a perspective into where I was coming from my statements so that you're able to clearly understand exactly what I was talking about. Hopefully that'll give you some pointers of where to go with those pieces. So let's do another question. Since we're talking about networks, there's one dealing specifically with a couple of different kinds of standards. So no Googling this one and don't mention in the chat room, but the question is, which of these 10 gigabit Ethernet standards would you be most likely to see integrated into a SONET network? So now you have to figure this one out. Now I've got multiple standards in here, 10 gigabit Ethernet standards and integrating into a SONET network. Now I do have, fortunately for you, multiple choices here. and it's not on that picture of me. It's right here. Here it is. You can see we've got 10 Gbase ER, 10 Gbase SW, 10 Gbase T, 10 Gbase SR, and 10 Gbase FX. One of these you would be most likely to see integrated into a SONET network. The Network Plus exam has a number of different standards you have to know for Ethernet, not just 10 or 100. I think we have to know many of 10 gigs or 10 megabit standards, but certainly 100 megabit, gigabit, and 10 gigabit standards are important to know. That's an important part of this, being able to work through that. Let's fix some of these problems that I have in here. The important part of this is knowing what the standards are and when you would use them. And we use these 10 gig standards all the time. This is probably one of the most prevalent, certainly one of the newest types of standards that you would find out there. I think it's one that most people are, when they're implementing large data networks, it's really 10 gig standards that you're going to be working with. So you need to know what those are. If you think you know the answer, go out to Socrative.com and you can answer this as well. This is one where you really have to know the standards cold. In the Network Plus exam, there are a number of things we do have to become familiar with. And I recognize that if we're not working with these standards every day, it's almost like a foreign language. It becomes more of a rote memorization. And that is probably true to some degree. If you're in a data center now, or you have access to people who work there, you can ask them about how they're using some of these standards and where they're plugging in. That might give you an idea about perspective and where it is. Oh, what's going to be the next big standards? Who knows? There is 40 gig that is certainly a very prevalent standard right now. And that's one that's kind of keeping up with the chipsets that we have. But the Ethernet standards tend to follow the capabilities that we have down at the physical side. You know, we have to have these physical capabilities. We have to have the chipsets to be able to even have these standards be available. So it really depends on the evolution of the chipset as to what's going to happen with the standards. And that usually is a standard process we see happen over and over and over again. That's really the key. And of course, we can do multiple 10 gig links. We can have link aggregation with multiple 10 gig links, or even multiple 40 gig links. 40 gig standard is a good one with this one, being able to use those. It's a good set. It's a good set of things to know. So let's see how we did with which of these 10 gig Ethernet standards would you most likely see integrated onto a SONET network. Well, we're all over the place. We're everywhere. I guess nobody chose 10 Gbase ER, but we're sort of a mixed match. I guess if we had to choose a winner in this, it would be 10 Gbase FX, and tied for second maybe is SW, T, and SR standards. So this is where you do get into, especially on SONET networks, and being able to work through them, what it happens to be. There's a lot of different standards, and I think I put onto my list of slides a lot of different standards. So let's flip through them very quickly. I want to first go through kind of the ones that are dealing with copper. So there's some very, very common 10 gig standards for copper that you would want to know about. The most common is 10 Gbase T. So if you see 10 Gbase T, that's 10 gigabit networks over copper. Now, if we look at fiber, and since we were talking about a SONET network, we were probably talking about fiber. There's two very broad types of standards over fiber. One is the short range, the 10 Gbase SR, and then there is the extended range, the 10 Gbase ER. And that is when you're just taking Ethernet and putting it over a very long distance. But of course, you want to be able to work at a different level as well. You want to be able to operate and use this gigabit network even over larger networks, something like an Ethernet network over the WAN, especially as it relates to SONET. So one way to do that's with 10 Gbase SW. And this is one where we really are taking this 10 gig Ethernet and integrating it into a larger SONET network. This is something that a provider might be doing. That's a very common way to do it, to be able to work through those things. And I think the providers, they do a pretty good job at providing and bundling in a lot of different kinds of networks into a single link. This is one way to do it over those SONET and those SDH networks. It's the same fiber. It's the same connectivity as the other Ethernet types, just a different way to package it up and send it over those links. So 10G base SW is the one that we are looking at here for these pieces and being able to work with that. This is, if we go back to our list, the one that is the 10G base SW is B. So if you're one of the 19% that answered B, 10G base SW, you got that one absolutely right. The ER, the extended range to short range, would not be over SONET. 10G base T would be one for copper, and 10G base FX we don't have in our list at all, being able to do that. So those are important ones to think about. Our winner, our 31% here, wasn't even close to what we were dealing with. The SW was really the one we were looking for. So well done there for the 20% of you. Somebody jumped on there at the end. Did you see that? Jumped in there. No, I answered SW. I absolutely did. What are you talking about with those pieces? Getting that going. Let's do another one. I've got a lot of questions here. I'm trying to put together as many as I can when working through these pieces, just so you have a lot of different options available. Here's a question for you, dealing with yet another term that we have to figure out for networking. It seems like all we do are figure out the acronyms, isn't it? This one dealing with an acronym called RRAS. So the question is, which of these would you not commonly associate with RRAS or RRAS, RRAS, or however you'd like to say it? This question deals specifically with these answers. Would you not commonly associate a network proxy, a demand dial router, a VPN connectivity, a remote access server, or a multi-protocol router with RRAS? One of these would certainly be a way to do that. So which would it be for RRAS? If you think you know the answer, go to Socrative.com. You can go to the student login to the Professor Messer room. And make sure you spell that right with Professor Messer, and you can answer the RRAS. This is one where I would bet in most environments, I'm trying to think about all the ones that I've gone into in the last 10 years or so. There was something relating to this technology running in practically all of them. Even if I didn't tell you or didn't specifically see the technology, I can almost guarantee that something like this technology is going to be running in even the smallest networks that you would run into. So that might give you a little bit of a hint on this. And you can answer and figure out the RRAS stuff. Yeah, if you are watching this for continuing education units, I will sometime in this presentation, I have either provided you with a keyword or I will be providing you with a keyword. And I'll explain to you when we get to that point, or when I got to that point, what that would be. RRAS. So if we think we know, let's see how we did with the RRAS or how we're doing so far. And we're all over the place. We're split again. We aren't quite certain which one of these would not be associated with an RRAS. So it would be useful, I think, to go through what the RRAS happens to be. Let's start with the RAS part. That will be the first thing that we'd like to go through and figure out. RAS stands for Remote Access Service. This is one where if you are outside the network and you need access to network resources, you are very commonly going through a remote access service to authenticate and provide you with a secure access to those devices. This is the technology that's been around for a long time with this. It's been included since Windows NT as a service itself as the operating system, and that's been when we had the dial-up access for those. But of course, these days we have even better, faster, stronger. So there's the routing and remote access service, the RRAS we call it, and the routing and remote access service adds on a routing component to this. Because we can do so much routing in an operating system these days, we don't need an external router. Let's just route in the operating system itself. Very useful to be able to do that. There is quite a bit that a remote RAS or routing RAS can do. Multi-protocol router, certainly part of it, just as the name implies, being able to do that with the RRAS. And the Windows version of this supports both RIP and OSPF for dynamic routing, and you can, of course, do static routing as well. A demand dial router, that means that it will not create the connection out to the world unless it needs to. This can be really useful in environments that have limited access to a wide area network, or you might even have an on-demand type network like a dial-up or an ISDN network. So if you're not using the remote access, it's turned off. But as soon as you would like to access the network, it automatically creates the connection, turns itself on, is able to connect. That's why we call it a demand dial router. It routes and dials on demand. It starts up that network connection when you demand it to. And the remote access server. How do we get people connecting to this device, being able to connect through an encrypted type of tunnel through a VPN, and then gain access to the internal devices? That's really what we designed this device to be in the very first place, was to provide that remote access. So let's go through our list now of what we would see in this device and see which one of these things would this not be then, because that was the question, wasn't it? Being able to do this. We've got a demand dial router. Well, we've already spoken about that one. VPN connectivity. Well, we talked about secure access and encrypted tunnels with these remote access devices. A remote access server, it's in the name, RAS. So that would not be the correct answer because it is a correct answer. And multi-protocol router, that's the R in the RAS, is the router part. The only thing that's not commonly associated and is not part of the remote access service in a Windows operating system is a network proxy. So that is the one, if you answered A, that is the one out of all of these that you would not commonly associate with an RAS. A routing and remote access service is the network proxy. So if you answered A, in this case, you 22% of you got that one absolutely correct by choosing the thing that it wasn't. Nice job on that one. That was a tough one. That was one we really need to know what that technology was and how it worked to be able to do that. And that's where we really get into a challenge when working with these technologies. Is there's so many technologies that you would have to work through. There are routing technologies, the RAS technology itself, VPN connectivity, being able to understand how these packets are going over the network, how we would ever want to be able to use these technologies and have them operate. So fortunately, my friends at GTS Learning have created labs for us, ways that we could go in and use these technologies ourselves on these Windows devices, load up an RAS and be able to work through it. And one of the things that I like doing with these is working with these technologies and using them. Have used these live practice labs for a long time, and the live practice labs are very useful to be able to do that. And be able to use these. I think that that's one of my challenges whenever I'm working through understanding a new topic. It helps me if I can do some hands-on. Helps me if I can go to a command line and run the command, if I can load the software myself, if I can operate and use an actual configured system, or at least break it and try to fix it myself. That's one of the great ways that I go through trying to figure these pieces out. The labs themselves, always available. They're online and accessible through your browser. You don't even have to have any extra software on your computer. You simply load up your browser. The latest browsers will use HTML5 to be able to do this. And it's a great way to go through this and connect without having to load anything special on your network. I've got a number of things that I use, but this is one that's always going to be there because it's all done in the cloud. You don't have to have any software on your local machine. You don't have to have any operating systems. You don't have to have any routers, and you can get an hour for free. You can find out more at professormesser.com/netlabs and load up an hour for free yourself and try the lab. Maybe it's something that will work for you, or maybe you like to build it yourself in your own lab. You can make that decision, but at least you get to try it for an hour and figure out that piece of it, something that becomes very, very useful on this. Just be able to go through and be able to use that on those pieces. I think that's one that I like using whenever I'm trying to figure things out on my network, is going and using these practice labs. They come in handy for this piece. And special pricing. You only get the $99 price if you go through that special link at professormesser.com/netlabs. And I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning for supporting what we're doing as well. Well, let's go through another question, shall we? I've got more. Here's a good one. One of the things that we have to know on the Network Plus exam is how to understand decimal, hexadecimal, binary, and octal. We have to be able to calculate all of them. So I have a calculation question for you. It's to be able to do this and being able to work with it. I think this is where it can really be useful to be able to do this, is now I have to do an actual calculation. And what's interesting about this question where I'm asking you, what is the octal value of 200 decimal? You're going to have to figure this out yourself. I don't have multiple choice for you. You're just going to want to put the answer in right here. Now, no Googling. Stop Googling the octal decimal calculator. Don't do that. Figure it out yourself. It's actually not too hard being able to work through that and figure out those pieces. This is one where this will come in handy. One of the very first large-scale computers I ever worked on was one designed by Control Data, and it was a device that displayed everything to you in octal. So when it showed job numbers, when it showed the amount of time left, when it identified how much of a particular resource was in use, it showed all of it in octal. So I had to very early on, this is very early on in college, try to figure out, okay, I'm looking at the screen, it shows this value. What is that really in the world of 10 fingers and 10 toes? And being able to figure that piece out. And the way you do that is by doing this this particular conversion from octal to decimal and back and forth. And we were on our ARPANET. It was very early on, being able to connect all of these different universities together. And I don't even think I remember my old email, my ARPANET email that we used. That was a very fun time in networking and computing. Yeah, you do kind of need a pencil. Is this on the test? This is so on the test. This is absolutely on the test. Again, go to your exam objectives and have a look. It is all there. In fact, I'll bring up the list here where you have to know the basics of network theory and concepts. And unfortunately, here I've made some notes on this one, different colors, but you can see that you have to know numbering systems, binary, hexadecimal, and octal. It certainly could be asked. Will it be on your test? Who knows? Some of this might be on your test. None of this might be on your test. But it certainly can be on the test because it's clearly stated in the exam objectives. So you will have to figure this piece out yourself and figure those. This is one of those where, and it's not as hard as you might think. You will be able to, in your test, they will give you either a sheet of paper. These days, most likely, they're going to give you a whiteboard or a piece of glossy laminated paper that you will use with a whiteboard type erasable marker. So you want to be able to figure those pieces out when you're working through it. There is a lot to worry about with the decimal to octal thing. And some of you have done really well with this question because I get to see the answers coming in. But of course, I'm asking you the octal value of a decimal number. So we're going to have to figure out those pieces to do it. There's some of you are just giving up because you can put anything in the answer. And some of you have just said, you know what? I don't know. I don't know what that happens to be. So let's step through it. It's not as hard as you might think. So let's step through a piece of this. So octal is what is also called base 8 and being able to work through it. Base 8 is it's a good one to know. I mentioned a good example of this, but you'll run into this quite a bit when you're doing conversions, especially to memory addresses and being able to interpret hexadecimal, decimal, and you'll see a lot of this in the Windows programming side as well, and being able to work with these. So the real question, though, is that how do we calculate this? Well, octal is only going to be using the values 0 through 7. There's only 8. An octal is the number 8. So what you'll want to do is first create a conversion chart. And you can do that by putting these values up on your screen. You want to take, on the far right side is the number 1. That's the ones place of this. You have the 8ths place, if you will, for those pieces. So you can put an 8 there. So you multiply by 8 each time. 1 times 8 is 8. 8 times 8 is 64. 64 times 8 is 512. So go through and just put those 4 numbers down. And of course, you can keep going if you'd like to with those. Go past 512 times 8. Times 8 times 8 times 8. You can build out a very large octal chart of this. And if you wanted to break it down, that is the same thing as 8 to the 0 power, 8 to the first power, 8 to the second power, 8 to the third power. That's what we're really building here, is a chart that does that. So that's the first thing that's very useful to be able to work with this is it's right there, and being able to have that there. I think the optical side of this is very useful too. So let's use our chart. Let's put it in here. So we've got a value of 200 decimal. Here's our chart. Now, the first thing you should be able to do is this. Let's go through the step by step, and I'll break down for you exactly the way to do this. Now, we're dealing with the number 200, so we have to figure out where does 200 fit into our chart that does not go over what go under what we're looking at. So I can fit 200 in. Where's the first place where 200 will not be less than the number that's listed? So if I find that on this chart, if I put it here, 200 would be less than 512, so that doesn't count. 200, I can put 200 into 64 because we're really dividing here. So I want to divide 200 by 64, and I get 3. And if we were to take 200 and divide it by 64 and get a 3, how much is left over then? Well, 8 is left over, so we'll move the 8 over. 8 divided by 8 is a 1. And that means we've got none left over. So we put a 0 up. 0 divided by 1, obviously going to be a 0. So there's the way we do. Every single time you want to put a decimal number in, that's the way you do it. You're dividing using this chart that you've created. You figure out the first place that the number will go and not be under the number that is there, and be able to work through these pieces. So if we were to look at the octal value of this, you bring down that number 310. So that is how you would calculate this octal value into these pieces and being able to work with this. There's quite a bit that you can do with these and being able to work through these. The 310 based on, we've got a 200 decimal and worked out 310. That's a good example. But I've got even more examples in my video that explains how to do this. I also do the reverse of this in my video where I take an octal number and I create the decimal version of that, which is effectively the same thing in reverse. We're multiplying to be able to create the decimal version of this piece. So this is one where knowing how to do these calculations, not just for octal, but for binary and hexadecimal, are very important to be able to understand what are these things that are popping up on my screen. So for those of you that answered 310, and if I go through this list, I can see a few of them said 310. You got those absolutely correct. Obviously, I was asking for octal. Some of you provided me with a binary representation. We weren't looking for binary. We were looking for octal in this particular case. So that should give you an idea. What I would recommend doing is get just random numbers, pick some random numbers out of the air, put them into this chart, and be able to work through that random number, and then check your math with the standard scientific calculator that's in your operating system. So you'll be able to perform that calculation. You can also type the number into Google literally, and it will tell you what the answer is as well. There is a number of things you can do with this. If you are watching this for continuing education credit, this would be the special key code that you would be giving to me is the term octal. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website where I say contact us, and you'll be able to click on that, put in there your name, put in there that it was the October 2015 Network Plus study group, and that the code word is octal. And you can do that whether you're watching live or whether you're watching this on a replay. All of them are good for continuing education units. That might be something useful to go through as well. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of an entire hour's worth of questions and answers. I wish we had even more to go through for this, but make sure you stick around because in the after show, I'll be taking your phone calls and answering questions as well. But of course, there's more of this next month. We're already planning the next one of these. If you'd like to join us live, maybe you're watching this in the replay, you think I'd like to answer these questions in real time, join us. The next one will be on November the 11th of 2015. And if you'd ever want to find out when the next one's going to be, you can always go to my calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. So until next month, make sure you check out my course notes at professormesser.com. Here's all the links. If you ever want to find me, type in professormesser.com/ YouTube, Twitter, Google+, Facebook. Vouchers can give you 10% off of your CompTIA vouchers. Make sure you check those out as well. And my thanks again to GTS Learning. If you'd like to try your free hour of live labs, you can go to professormesser.com/netlabs. And if you're sticking around, we'll open up the phone lines. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on the study group. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in November. Thanks, everyone. Wow, that was a fast hour of those things going through, wasn't it? It's quite a bit going through all of those pieces. I never seem to be able to get through as much as I think I'm going to be able to get through. Thank you, Luca. Thanks for the support, buying the course notes. It is remarkable and surprising how important those have become at keeping the website going. So I can't thank you enough. I should calculate out just how much you're able to keep the website going by purchasing one of those, so you can understand just how much it's keeping the lights on. Very important. It's kind of nice because I have free videos. How do we keep all of this going? I've got a reverse proxy which also does encryption for me. I've got a load balancer. I have 2 web servers and a database server that all have to keep this whole thing going. So it does become very useful to be able to do that and have those pieces. Very nice. And yes, the replay of this will be available immediately afterwards. And of course, you can scroll back and forth right now as well with those things, being able to do those pieces. I opened up the phone lines. If anybody wants to be able to call and have that here. So let me do that while we're sitting here, and I'll start that piece of it up. And I probably need to call in so that I can hear you when you are calling in. The call-in lines I'll mention in just a moment as soon as I find my Skype, which is more difficult than it seems it should be for those pieces. You know what I didn't do before this was see if it was working. So it's one of those things. Should we try it? Since we're here holding some very gripping type of live video would be Skype test call.
Hello.
Welcome
to Skype call testing.
Well, hello,
service.
nice Skype
After
call
the beep,
testing. Ever done this? You can test this.
Afterwards, your message
Just leave
will
a
be
message.
played back to you.
Hi, Skype call testing lady. Thank you for allowing me to call in and test myself on your Skype service. I hope that I'm able to hear myself without much of a problem. Skype call testing lady. Thank you for allowing me to call in. So you can hear yourself on the Skype. If you've never done this, it's a Skype test call. So it comes in handy. You can, of course, call in via Skype for absolutely free to the number I will give you in just a moment. As soon as I call in to my service and I'm able to, you're welcome. Let's see if I can do this without you hearing the DTMF go by. Okay. Welcome. Robot says welcome. So if you would like to call in, do I have, there it is. It is 855-785-7545. That number again, 855-785-RJ45. You can call if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to either, because I am taking also questions from the chat room. So you can always go to the chat room at professormesser.com/live, or if you're on my website, you can certainly join the live event chat if this is indeed live, and you can ask me questions directly on those pieces. The SDN stuff. So I got some interest in the SDN, being able to work with those. The management plane, control plane are effectively the same thing. There's really not much of a difference between those. You'll see people call them different things. Some people say there's a management plane and a data plane. Other people say there's a control plane and the data plane. It's the same thing. Management and control are effectively the same piece of that. I guess you could even break them out even further than that if you really wanted to for those pieces. For those of you that were asking about the continuing education units, you can absolutely send them in to me at any time. There's no time when CompTIA doesn't specify a timeout or an expiration of these things. So if you are hearing this years from now, you ostensibly should be able to send me the continuing education code word, and I should be able to provide you with that credit. So I think that's the important piece of that, being able to work with it. And it works for this one too. You don't have to be live to be able to use that continuing education code word. This could be a replay as well, and I will be able to do that. So it's an important piece. Wow, how did IT change my life in the job spectrum? Well, there's this. I could say that this would be a good example of how IT can change things. This has sort of been an interesting ride. IT was probably one of the very few segments you can go into for a career where you really get to decide what you want to do, where you can just choose whatever path you want to go to. Software-defined networking wasn't around when I started doing this. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. There effectively was no internet to speak of when I got into technology. So that's why I think IT is really an enabler. It allows you to do whatever you'd like. I got started in help desk and working with operating systems. And when I went from there, I started getting into networking. I'm like, that's interesting. This networking piece is interesting. And then it just sort of blossomed out from there. So you just kind of follow it. You just kind of hop in the boat and the river's going to take you where you're going. You can kind of paddle sort of a direction you want to go, but you're really, it's going to be leading you down where you would like to be for those pieces. And working with those. The CEU that you're getting for this, although it is a Network Plus event, if the certification is one that happens to have networking in it, and that includes certainly A plus and probably Security Plus as well, this would also be a CEU you could use towards those certifications as well. There's a lot that's going on in this picture, isn't it? There's a lot of things. Down here are my Cylons. Those are recording systems that I have. They are recording 2 video streams, one video stream that is live. That is the one that is on the right side in front of me. And there's a video stream that's the preview. That is what you see when I push a button that's on the left side. I record both of them simultaneously, whether you see it or not. So the one you end up seeing is this one, obviously. But I'm also recording the one you just saw behind the scenes. And of course, I adjust things on my screen to be what the preview will be. I record them just because I can record both of them. Usually I'm recording both of them when I do my courses. I record the talking head view that you see here, and then I record the view of my desktop. So what you would see here. So I end up having 2 video streams that I then bring back into a single editor, and I just overlay into the picture in a picture and tack on the beginning and tack on the end, and boom, I made a video. That sounded so easy, didn't it? It's so simple, the way that it works. Well, that's pretty much the way it operates. These are recording systems from a company called Blackmagic. And it's Blackmagic. I have no idea how it works. It's just recording onto some SSDs that I have down there. Oh, there it is. Sorry. I'm popping around now on my viewer here. This is just SSDs that are there. And it's an interesting recorder because you can put multiple SSDs in, and when it fills up one, it will go to the next one, and then you can swap out the first one, and it swaps over. So you can technically record forever as long as you have storage to put into it. And it really does have to be SSDs because it's storing some very large files that are uncompressed video. That's the real challenge with these pieces for those. 10 gig standards. So the question about 10 gig standards from Lewis. So wavelengths, you certainly need to know some of the most common wavelengths for these 10 gig networks. Generally, the wavelengths is going to be, are you running multi-mode or single mode? And there's not that many different wavelengths that you would use, especially in Gigabit Ethernet. So you do need to know that. It is part of the exam objectives. So you absolutely, in my N10006 videos, do give you an explanation of not just sizes of fiber, so you understand what the nanometer sizes refers to, and I have images that show you that. But you also need to understand what the frequencies, what the wavelengths are that are being used over those fibers. And there's not a lot of different ones, so there's not a lot you have to know. Now, of course, for the exam, there's not a lot that you have to know. Obviously, in the world of things, there are many different types of networks running over many different wavelengths. You only need to know what's on the exam objectives. So don't worry about that piece and being able to work with that. This is, what did I do before I started in IT? Well, I didn't do anything. I started with IT. I actually got my degree in business management. But as I was getting my degree in business management, I was working at my university in the computer center. And at that time, the computing center was one that was primarily mainframes, the Octal control data machine. That's where that was. I was an operator, so I took printouts off a printer, off a big chain printer. I mounted tapes onto tape drives. I got plots off the plotter, and just sort of coordinated the input and the output of information in and out of the computing center. And I also made sure everything was running okay. Temperatures were good. Humidity was good. It was getting cool water. The mainframe was not overloading or overheating. That was what I was doing. And I just had an interest in technology even back then. So when I got out, the first job I got was with a company that had that sold computers, and I just sort of kept with computing since then. Ultimately ended up using some of the management that I had been formally trained on, and as it turns out, didn't like it. I didn't really enjoy management. For the time that I was in it, I did have a good time with it. It was not my number one thing. I enjoyed being technical more than I enjoyed managing technical people. And I recognize in our industry, there is a need, or companies feel that it's important that you move up in the organization into a management role. But what I found in technology is that there are jobs in IT at the technical level that pay you very well and don't require you to do any management. So I thought, that's great. I'm going to do this and not go into management. And it worked out just fine, I think. Ultimately, I learned after writing a book and creating some commercial training courses, I thought I would just love to do this full time. And how can I do that? What is the process I would need to go through to be able to make that happen? I think everybody should think about that when they're thinking about careers, is what is the process I should go through to be able to do that? That's the important part, because if you don't know where you're going, how are you ever going to get a path to that? So I thought, how can I just do this full time, make a bunch of videos, put them on the internet, and do training things? And we built a business plan, create a business plan to build this business with. How would we do that and still be able to make a profit and be able to keep everything running and be able to feed my family, because they get hungry. I don't know what that's about. They want clothing. They want shelter. I don't know. To be able to do that. So we came up with a plan. And we started putting that plan into place, and it started working. And there were tweaks along the way. We modified the business plan. Well, we tried this didn't work very good. Let's do it differently. And it's remarkable, because it is the internet, that you make small little changes, and it's remarkable the impact those small changes can have on what you're doing. So it is one of those where IT kind of enables you to do whatever you'd like to do, whether it's dealing with operating systems or databases or internet or websites or load balancers or et cetera, or et cetera, or et cetera, et cetera. It is quite remarkable. Yeah, today's warm beverage, by the way, which is incredibly important because I've been talking for now over an hour and 17 minutes. The beverage today is a flavored coffee. This is a Dunkin' Donuts glazed chocolate donut. I think that's what this is. So there you go. That's what the one. Sometimes it's so it can be different things. It can be sometimes it's just a hot chocolate. Sometimes it's a standard coffee. One of those things to be able to work with, be able to have that there for those. So there is, yes. So I don't know what kind of the chat room now had some type of pool going on what I was drinking. It is not red wine. Not in this. Now later. There will be some red wine. But for now, I tend to have these study groups be a little bit more cogent, a little bit more sober. So it's important to be able to stay focused. And I have other things to do after this. I have a lot of video to edit today. So I will be doing a lot more when we're done. So the day's not over quite yet. We've got a lot more to work on those pieces. That's where I start to get into trouble, because as soon as you get to the wine or the beer, and it's a problem because it's Oktoberfest right now, as soon as you do that, your editing's over for the day. Then it becomes more of an issue, and being able to work through those. So you don't want to have that happen either. From the chat room, what kind of jobs in IT do not require being on call, or how common is it to be on call, or be able to do this on call? It kind of varies. There are some jobs where it's nothing but on call. Like you won't be bothered unless there's an issue. and the issue can happen anytime. So it's very common. I've worked with people that were worked with large telecommunications companies, and they were third tier tech support. So they weren't the first call. They weren't the first person calls, the first tier calls the second tier. When the second tier can't figure it out, they went to these people. And most of the time these were big problems at that point. If the first and second tier couldn't figure it out, it was a thing, right? So their job was to sit by the phone, and if anybody called, they were on it right then. So it was like a fireman. So you're waiting for the fire to happen, and then you're jumping into it immediately. And most of the time this did happen during the day because a large telecommunications company has places around the globe. And usually, it follows the sun, as they say. If somebody's calling in, you're calling into the call center where the sun is out right then, because those are the people that are awake. But there are times when that person would have to get up at 2 a.m. and answer a phone call 3 a.m, 4 a.m, and not uncommon. Ideally, you're going to be paid pretty well at that point because you are on call. And in many places, there are on call. You're on call this week. You're on call the next week. It's something we all have to go through, especially when you're trying to learn the technology. Well, that's one of the best ways to learn it, and that's one of the jobs that you're in. But there are a number of technology jobs that have no on-call whatsoever. You are there during the working hours, and after working hours, there's really nothing for you to do. The last job I had was one with a security company that made firewalls. I was on the technical sales team. So we were going to talk to people about the technology, explain to them how awesome the technology was, see if they want to evaluate the technology. And we installed it on an evaluation. And if they liked it, they bought it. They didn't, we went to the next one. So that was what I did day after day. I was there when they were there during the day having conversations, but I wasn't part of their infrastructure. I was showing them a product for sale. So I didn't have to worry about my product going down or breaking something because I wasn't in their network in a production level. I was in their lab in an evaluation. And ideally, the product wouldn't go down. I worked with a very solid product that I was very proud to use and very proud to show other people, so that helps too. And I got to go to bed at night and wake up in the morning, and there was no on-call. And if it's a holiday, I was not working on the holiday. But it took a number of jobs to get to that point, to get to that level. And this job is obviously a little different. This job's 24/7. So I can decide what my schedule is, though. I can decide what's on call. If I want to sit in here until 3 a.m, I can sit in here until 3 a.m. If I want to stop right now, we'll stop. No, I'm just kidding. But I can make that decision. I can decide myself what I want to do. So there's a number. IT is just full of different options of things you can do. So feel free to take advantage of those options. Make a goal of what you want to do, and then find the business model that gets you into that particular role. It's one that very, very easy to do. Easier than you would expect with IT. A lot of people think IT would be difficult, but no, it really isn't. That's exactly the way it works. And being able to work. I really enjoy technical sales. I got into technical sales probably about 20 years ago. And was in roles where I was the end user. I worked for value-added resellers and ultimately landed with a manufacturer and stayed with the manufacturers from that point on. I really enjoyed doing that. It's a technical role. You get to travel a lot. You get to see a lot of people. You're not in the same room every day. It's exciting technologies that I associated myself with. I wouldn't work for a boring one, of course. And in some cases, was able to work for startups that did very well. So there's an upside to some of these things too, even for someone who's technical in IT. Something certainly to consider. Now, people I would meet that would say, I would not want to do your job. You're on a plane every day, every other day. You're traveling around the country and in some places traveling around the world. And I don't like that particular thing. Like, that's great. I mean, you should find something you like. I think that's fine. Good. Don't do it. If you don't want to do that, don't do it. This works for me, kind of thing. Being able to work with those. And you'll probably do on call before you do off call. I will tell you that. Almost certainly with those pieces. Question earlier in the chat room was talking about other courses. So on my website right now there is the A+ course, the Network Plus course, obviously, the Security Plus course. There's the Microsoft 7680 for Windows 7. It still gets a little bit of interest. People are still watching the Windows 7 stuff. And a little bit of Linux. Not as much as I would like, but a little bit is still there. And it's still applicable to the Linux world. I'd love to do more Linux videos. It's about time at this point. It's a time motion study. How much can I do with the amount of time I have available? How much can I move? So my goals right now, I'm in the middle of creating A+, the updated A+ videos. Those should be out by the end of the year. And then I get to decide what's next. And I haven't decided yet. It probably will not be Microsoft certifications. Microsoft has a very large base of options to go to. There's a lot of competition there and way too much content. Not interested in getting into the middle of that. I need to find the ones that have lesser content and lesser competition so that people will watch the videos, because there is a business side of this associated with that piece. And I think, and I've considered, making course notes, even if I don't have videos. So wouldn't it be great to have a Linux plus course notes, even if I don't have Linux plus videos available? So certainly that's something I have considered. Same thing with Cisco, same thing with VMware, same thing with, pick a type of technology. Even up in Palo Alto Networks firewalls. I've got a huge knowledge base in my brain of Palo Alto Networks. Maybe I should take advantage of that. But it's all about how many people would benefit from something like that, because it is a business decision that we're making for those pieces. And I have thought about also extending the services I'm providing now. So Jamie in the chat room is asking about doing daily pop quizzes for Network Plus and Security Plus, which would be a great idea. I would love to do that. It's about timing, though, of course. It's about writing these questions. Writing the questions for just the A+ pop quiz every day, they're time consuming. I have to write it from scratch, figure out what the question's really going to be, modify that so I'm really hitting the topic I'm trying to hit, and then come up with 4 or 5 very, very tricky answers. Not overly tricky, but they need to be difficult enough and be able to give you those answers. It takes a while to do that. So I have not been able to commit myself to doing that yet, but I have considered maybe doing once a week. Should I just start them up? And then if I increase later on in the year, that would be fine. But could I at least get one out every week? Might be a good way to start. And I have considered doing that. I think that'd be a good way to go about doing it as well. Cloud Plus, Mobility Plus, probably not in the top 10. I get a bit of interest every now and then. I probably get Cloud Plus. I get a request every month, and Mobility Plus every 6 months. So there's not a lot of interest in either of those particular certifications, at least not for the people I've spoken with. Maybe I'm wrong. And anybody thinks I'm wrong on these, turn me around. Send me an email. Ask me about them. See what that is. Maybe you can tell me that I'm wrong with those pieces and where they're going. I think once a week might be a good start. I think it might be a good way to get things going, because there's a lot of good stuff in my brain that I would like to get out on a piece of paper. The study groups is a good example of that. It takes about 4 hours, really 3 hours to create the questions, and another hour to build them and get the Socrata built in and add the slides to the deck. And so it's a good half day for normal people to. For me, half day is like 8 to 8. That's half day. But it takes 4 hours to be able to get that entire package built. And then I can put it aside and go to the next thing with those pieces, and being able to work with them. Let's talk DNS, since there's DNS questions on here. Quick first click around. DNS, where does a DNS server store IPs and frequently or fully qualified domain names for the computers within a certain domain? And can I talk about the process of encryption at the OSI layers? I can do one of those. I can kind of do both of them. There is an entire book. Do I have this book around here anywhere? On DNS and bind. It's from O'Reilly. It is one of the most comprehensive DNS books you'll ever find. All of this DNS information, and this is in my Network Plus course, everything's stored in a file, just a flat ASCII file on the most common DNS implementations. There's other ways to store this, but that's the most common way. And everybody just configures up their DNS server with this information. So I have a DNS server for my servers where I put in, if you need to get to professormesser.com, go to this IP address. And I posted that out there on the internet. So I built my DNS server from a web front end, but it's effectively done the same way everywhere. You are adding the name of these servers, where your mail server is, what its IP address is, what its name is, and you're configuring up these files in the DNS server itself. That's where it's getting them from. And that's why whenever you hop around to that DNS resolution process and it finally gets down to your DNS server, that's where it's pulling it from, is from those configuration files. And it's very easy to mess up a DNS server config. So easy. It really takes quite a lot of testing and making sure when you're making changes in there. Windows does a lot of this automatically, of course. Part of its DNS is that it will register new users when they come onto the network with their name, so that when you're looking up someone's Windows name, it correlates back to an actual IP address. So very good to do that. I think one of the best ways to do this is to download Bind. Start up your own Bind server, or download a VM that already has Bind on it. BIND. It's a Berkeley Internet name thing. Why am I drawing a blank? Berkeley Internet name something. Chat room will fix me. That's one of the easy ways to get a simple DNS going, or download one of the Windows servers, the evaluations they have. I think they have 90-day server evals. Download it, load it up on a virtual machine in your lab, start up the DNS service, and look at all the different things you can configure. It doesn't use even a flat file. It gives you a front end. It makes it very easy to work on some of these. Just easy to do that. Network Plus study books. I like the GTS Learning books. They are the books that I use to make my videos. So they're my first place to go to be able to do that. And the DNS videos that I have, or the Network Plus videos I have, that's why I have that GTS Learning logo right there at the bottom, because I just read their book, took that information, made some slides and videos of them, and you get what you get. I do some of my very bad graphics, and being able to work with that as well. So that's another thing that comes in handy as with that. What else do we have? Berkeley Internet Name Domain. So it's as literal as I thought it was with those pieces. And that's why I like the GTS Learning books. They tell you exactly what you need to know and no more. Now, if you're looking for a book that goes into the detail of DNS, you probably want to get something like the O'Reilly book on DNS and Bind. But it's going to go well beyond what the Network Plus exam is going to ask of you. In fact, it probably goes well beyond what most things are going to ask of you. But it tells you everything you would want to know. If you're looking for something that just gives you exactly what you need to know for the Network Plus exam, and that's it, then the GTS Learning books are exactly what you're looking for. That is, they're built to be exactly that. The chances of updating the Linux Plus videos at this point are probably not great. It's one of those I'd love to do because there's a lot of interest in it, but it's about time, and I just don't have any at the moment. I think when the new year gets here, I'll have a chance to take a breath. By that time, all my A+ videos should be almost or already completed, at least shot. They're in the can waiting for post-production. And then I can go through and think about what to do next. Where do I want to spend time doing next? I already have some plans. I already know what I think I'm going to be doing for the next year. You know, I've kind of mapped it out. But these things change. I have things that will get added to the list or moved on the list depending on what's happening in the world. So that's one of those things that I think I know, but one of the advantages I have is that it's just me making videos. It's me, and now I have a marketing person. So I was two people. It's a two-person company. We can change on a dime. If we decide today, this is awful, no more study groups, we're done, then we're done. Or we want to do one every day, we'll do one every day. I can make that decision immediately. I don't have to ask people. I don't have to fight with people over it. I don't have to justify it other than to myself, and we do it. We've done things with this company. We're just going to try it. We're going to go as fast as we can. If we hit the wall, we're just going to hit it really, really, really hard, and we'll see what happens. And sometimes you do. Sometimes you hit the wall really, really, really hard. And sometimes you go really, really fast and there's no wall. So you never quite know what you're going to find. It may be that the Linux Plus is the next big thing. Maybe it is. It's one of those where we do have to sit there and figure it out. Do I think people would watch a Linux Plus study group? Maybe so. That's another one where, should I do more live streams? Is there a benefit to doing that for these particular products or these particular learning exercises? Maybe there is. And one of the things you have to realize is when I will sit down with my vice president, who happens to be Mrs. Professor Messer, and we'll sit down and figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Where are the pluses and minuses? What's happening in the industry? What are the top certifications? Just the environment I work in with training people in technology, the entire environment of companies has changed in the last 2 years. There used to be many companies. Now they have consolidated. There's other companies that have gotten bought. People have approached me and said, would you be interested in acquisition? It's remarkable what's happening right now in this industry. It's really weird. And I'm not. I have no interest in acquisition. Nobody. I've already worked for enough people. I have no interest in working for anybody. So if you're thinking of sending me an email, I just saved you some time. So there you go. It is remarkable. I'll send back. People say, would you be interested? I'll just reply back, nope, thanks. I'm not. But I appreciate the interest. No, thank you. We go do something else. Both of us will be happier, I assure you. Oh, this is not a taboo topic. What are my personal thoughts on brain dumps? It's cheating. There's no question. We call it brain dumps as a way to disguise the fact that we've gotten the answers to the exam and we're now studying from the answers on the exam. In any other environment, there is no question that is unethical. It's cheating. If you were in a school, you would be thrown out. So I don't think there's any question about that one. My personal thought is you're also fooling yourself because you're not learning the material. These certifications, and it's something that a lot of people miss. A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, these are really good certifications. This is coming from somebody who's worked in the industry for a long time that knows what you need to know to be able to do these jobs. And the information that's on these certifications is solid. You need to know about IPv4. You need to know about RAS. You need to know about SNMP to be able to do syslog. You need to understand SIMs. You need to understand IPS. You need to understand firewalls. You need to know all these things in the Network Plus. There's no part of the Network Plus you can look at and say, that isn't relevant at all, because every single bit of it is relevant. So if you're not learning the content, then you're missing out on a huge opportunity to actually learn something that can actually move you up to a place you would like to be in the industry. So that's the piece of it. Now, let's be clear, just certified. If somebody showed up with enough money, yeah, I'd sell in an instant. But nobody has enough money. That's the thing. That's the thing. 100 billion? Yeah, I don't know. That's still kind of low, isn't it? You'd have to show up you have to show up, because I understand the concept, because I've been in IT for long enough and been working for companies that have been acquired and at least have been watching from the sidelines on how this process works, is that companies are generally acquired for a certain valuation of the company. So the company has to be valued to a certain amount. And usually that's 4 or 5 times, 3 to 5 times the revenue, the annual revenue of the company. So I have a piece of that in my brain, so I know what the company's worth. So I know that nobody could buy me for what I want. So that's the thing. I'd have to do a lot more work and get my company to have much more revenue to be able to be at a point where an acquisition would make sense to me. And quite honestly, I'm having too much fun. I just couldn't see changing it at this point. This is what I've been working so hard at this point to do. Why would I decide not to do this anymore? It just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, there's people use brain dumps all the time. I'm not saying they don't. They do use them, and people pass their exams. And unfortunately, that gives the rest of the people who take that certification a bad name, which is why I think the inclusion of performance-based questions on the exam is a pretty good one. And you see that companies like CompTIA tends to change their entire pool of questions on occasion. That's been one most recently where people said, I took this exam and none of the questions on the exam were on the brain dump. And I internally laugh with glee and externally say, how are you studying? That's really, I think, great. you are supposed to fail. You were intended to fail. And even when people have the brain dumps and try to learn the answers, it's still difficult. And there's no guarantee there you're going to pass either. How many people actually go through all three certs, CompTIA certs? I guess you're referring to A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. I think a lot of people, some people only do Security Plus. Security Plus is one of the entry-level certs you need to work for the United States federal government in IT. So it's a very popular certification to get. So I usually have a lot of people that are doing A+ because they're trying to understand computing and technology and operating systems. That's a great place to start. And then there's a lot of people that are trying to get into federal government, so they just do Security Plus. And then there's a group of people that really like the networking piece, and usually they've already got the A+, and they want to be able to do the networking piece as well. So not everybody really does all three. You know, the value of the certification is what you do with it. So you have to think about when you're getting a cert, what is this going to buy me? What value is this? Because I'm going to be spending a lot of time studying. What's this really going to offer me when I'm finished learning this content? Is it something where I just have personal pride? That's great. Then that's the reason. That's plenty. Or is this going to get me a certain job because certain organizations are looking for the certification? That's another thing to think about as well. And a lot of people go beyond that. So a good example, you know, Jamie says his school or her school go through A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, Microsoft, Cisco. There's VMware. There's, keep it going, you know, on and on and on and on. There's tons of different certifications out there. So it just depends on what you want to do. You know, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't know where you want to be, start there. When people say, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years, they're not necessarily wanting to evaluate if you're making the right decision. They want to see if you've actually thought about it. Now, what do you want to do in 5 years? Where do you want to be? Well, I've got a plan that I want to have my own company, or I want to be able to be at a third tier at this company, or I want to work in this section, or I want to learn more about this part of what we do. That's what I want to be able to do with these pieces. That's the important piece, is being able to work with that. What Apple device is that in the background? That's a cube. That is an Apple cube. You don't see those much anymore. That is a working cube. And I keep saying that I'm going to absolutely have this cube. Here's one from the Mac world. I think there's the cube. I think I got a picture of this. There's the cube out at macworld.com. How many of these they sell? Cube was not a commercial success. Turn off the sound here. Sold 29,000 between October and December 2000. At the same time, they sold 308,000 Macs. Cube sales fell to 12,000 units the next quarter, and they stopped production in July. So it was out not very long before they just stopped selling them. Probably less than a year. And that was it. It was a G4 processor. This was before the Intel processor side. But it's cool looking. So it's perfect for the background there, to have it there. An Apple Cube was just a Mac. It's just a G4 Mac. And I have it. It's a working device. I've got the power supply and the mouse. It's a DVI out, so I can plug it into my connections here via HDMI and put it online even for those and those pieces. Pretty useful. How do I handle DDoS attacks? Can I show you a bit of my setup? I don't tend to show you a lot of details about my setup because I don't want to show people interested in how to do a DDoS where the fundamental problems might be, or the open places might be in the infrastructure. But I can tell you without much difficulty, if you did a DNS query on my web server, you don't go to my web server, you go to a what effectively is a reverse proxy. And there's a number of companies out there that do this. I use Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a company that provides a reverse proxy for large and small websites. So you're effectively hitting Cloudflare first, which is evaluating the content of what's being sent through, because it's a proxy. You're talking directly to Cloudflare, and then Cloudflare talks to me. I reply back to Cloudflare, and then Cloudflare talks to you. That's hard to say. And what's nice about that is they can evaluate the content. Are you sending a lot of information over a short period of time? Is there information coming from multiple sites and the information is nonsense? Is there suddenly a spike in the amount of traffic coming through? And I can change how I want to respond to that through the Cloudflare front end. There's many different ways to manage denial of service or distributed denial of service environments, whether it's one where you're setting bars or you're doing early discards. There's so many different ways. There's a lot of different strategies around that piece of it. But it also allows me to set firewall rules. So if there's certain IP addresses or ranges of IP addresses I would like to block, I can block them right there at the web server. They just don't even get here. I have a standard rule right at the top that says if you are in a block of IP addresses that has been assigned to China or to the Russian Federation, you're just blocked because there's nobody in those countries that has any need to come to my website. Now, that doesn't stop everybody from those countries. They could use a way to get around that. They could use their own proxies. They could use Tor. They could use many, many different ways to be able to change the IP addresses. So I do have other rules in my firewall that are evaluating what's in the data being sent. And if somebody's using a known attack, it'll just block it there and it never gets to my web server. So that's one way. And of course, I've got other ways to ramp these things up as well. I have behind the scenes, I'm running load balancers. I can spin up new web servers in an instant or spin them down. There's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes for those pieces and getting that to work. And that's why my web servers, I've got a little bit of everything. I've got web servers for accessing the Linux side of things is running there. I've got some Windows running here in the studio. This video switcher that you're seeing me processed through is being processed through Windows. I've got Linux here in the studio. My audio system, as I've mentioned in the past, my audio system here, the mixer that's to my left right here, that's an embedded Linux system. I've got Mac OS in front of me and to the right. I've got iOS. I've got some Android on some other devices. There's a little bit of everything everywhere. And my website, just like all websites, are under constant attack. They are constantly being hit and queried for vulnerabilities. They are being hit with whatever the latest vulnerability of the day happens to be. I see them immediately trying to hit my website. It's just one of those things where you constantly have to watch it, constantly be vigilant, and have the right type of security posture set up for the systems that you have in place. That's one that I think really does become important over time, being able to do that. And you kind of have to be in the middle of it in the industry and see what's happening. I had the benefit over the last 7 or 8 years of going to different places and looking at what they're doing for security. So I've been in some of the largest companies in the world. What do you do for security? What do you do for security? What do you do for security? And I kind of tried to gather as much as I could from all of them, kind of stick it in my brain and go, okay, if I was going to build it out, here's how I would want to build out a security posture for what I have. Because if this goes down, you don't have easily have access to the index of courses. A lot of the things that I do on my end don't work. You can't purchase any product, which certainly affects the ability of my company to work. That's a bit of a challenge. I don't get into the arguments about what operating system is better than the other. They're all better than each other. There's no argument. There's operating systems that clearly do things better than others. So you should use them to do those things. But that doesn't make them better or worse than the other, because the other operating system does things better than that one does. We could have that conversation all day. It's a worthless conversation. We can all just argue about it. And yes, every company is evil. There you go. We're done. We can go home now. We've already gone through every possible argument for every possible operating system. They don't work well and they're evil. They stole all my information. They're secretly watching me. I'm secretly watching you. Actually, it's not secret because I just told you. So I'm overtly watching you. But I'm watching when you come to my site. Are you getting the response times you need? Are you able to, here's how I'm watching you. I'll show you how I'm watching you. Let me bring up a view on my screen. Let's all watch each other right now. It's important if you're building up a system like this, how do you find if it's working or not? How do you know what's going on your server? So you need to find a way to be able to determine these things. How is the website running right now? How many people are on it? What type of transaction times are they seeing? Are these transaction times normal or not? This is the last 30 minutes. This is a product called, it's New Relic is the company. So I'm able to get metrics over what's happening. I don't care what you're doing. I want to see what everybody's doing. And if somebody comes on and something is going a little crazy, are there errors? So there's no errors listed currently, but I can get a feel for response times of my pages and my website and how it's running. And are there any errors that have popped up? You know, I have to install new versions of my content management system. I have to upgrade database versions. I have to upgrade different components of my Linux operating system. I want to know how it affects the performance of what you're doing. Yeah, and you can ping my site, but again, remember, you're not pinging my site. You're pinging the reverse proxy. And the reverse proxy has different entry points around the world. So if you're accessing my site from Europe, you're not only going to get a different set of servers that you're accessing, but you're also getting a different cache because it's caching the information as well. Much of what you're seeing when you hit my site is static. So it's cached up and just presented directly to you. It never comes down to my server. So that's the thing. Any response times you're getting are response times to Cloudflare, which should be pretty darn good most of the time. Very rarely is that going to be different than that. And my strategy has been one where I want to build availability. It needs to be at least optimized a bit performance-wise. Fortunately, the type of content on my site and the applications in use are not overly complex. There's not a lot of separate tiers. There's basically a web server and a database server. End of story. Not a lot of third parties are involved with that unless you're purchasing something. I don't collect credit card information. I don't want your credit card information. That's all handled separately. You're in my chat right now. You're not on my website. You're on somebody else's website. Well, you're on my website, but the chat piece is a software as a service that's running on different set of servers that's not on my servers. So there could be tons of people in chat, has zero impact on the performance of my website. So that's really important to me. I want to have as much running on my servers as I can that makes sense to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And the overall goal of my website is for you to get a job or to get a better job. So if I'm putting software and hardware in place and it's not getting you a job, it's not getting you a better job, then it needs to be done somewhere else. So that's whenever you hear people talking about a mission statement, that's what I mean. That I think is the ultimate use of mission statement. I look at the mission statement, which is get you a job, get you a better job. Am I doing the things that is going to accomplish that? What is the next step to accomplish that? Do I have the things in place that will allow you to do that? And then everything works backwards from there. Whew. That is, it's involved. Yeah, you really can't trace route past Cloudflare. You know, the IP address of www.professormesser.com is a Cloudflare device. Done. The SSL certificate you use to encrypt data to my site is on cloudflare.com. So I do encryption all the way through, but you're seeing the very beginnings of everything. The beginning and the end for you is at Cloudflare. That's it. Bottom line. So there's a ton of stuff behind that. You'll never see it. You can't access it. You can't get to it. If I've done my firewalls properly, you can't get to them individually. Even if you knew what the IP addresses were, you could not get there. There's a number of different things to be able to do that. I think that's a challenge. So what can I recommend for Linux Plus? I can't. I don't have any recommendations for you because I really don't spend a lot of time looking at other training courses. Well, when I say I don't spend a lot of time looking at other training courses, I spend zero time looking at other training courses. I don't look at any of the other training courses because I'm not working towards that certification, which is a little bit of a challenge. I think I could have an entire business that created video reviews of training courses, and I could do that full time. I think. I have a ton of business ideas in my head that will never ever see the light of day. That's just one of them. So I really don't have any recommendations other than just go try some, download them and do that. And I don't know of any. That's not a segment where I've done a lot of research. If you'd asked me other training courses, I might have some other ideas, but that's just not one. In the last 2 years, there's not one I've really done a lot of research on for those pieces. I don't use Cloudflare for hosting. There's no hosting done there. All the hosting is done at Rackspace, interestingly enough. So Cloudflare is only being used as a reverse proxy. That is their job. That's what they do as a company. They do nothing else. They don't host. They don't do web design. They don't do any of that. They provide high speed access to data through this reverse proxy. They don't do any host. They do caching. That's not really hosting for that, for those pieces. Can you nmap legally? Sure, you can nmap legally as long as you have permission to nmap. Nmap is network mapper. For those of you not familiar with it, I wrote a book on nmap, so I'm intimately familiar with it. Nmap is a very powerful network mapping software that you can use to find out what's on your network, what operating systems are they using, what services are running on these devices. You can do a lot with Nmap. Nmap is, and there's even a scripting language associated with Nmap that makes it infinitely usable for an amazing amount of things. You generally don't Nmap, you don't run mapping queries against devices you don't own because it is seen as someone who is acquiring data to be used then later to do something wrong, something bad against you. So generally, if you would like, there's nothing innately illegal in performing a port scan, which is one of the most basic functions of Nmap. There's nothing innately illegal about that, but it is certainly unethical. So you do get into this weird legal realm when it comes to hitting devices and running port scans. So to resolve any problem, don't do it unless you have permission, and then you don't have a problem. Otherwise, you're going to need a good lawyer. Bottom line, run it by them. Ask them. Well, I don't know the answer. Can you run Nmap legally? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I have no idea. I do know, though, if you ask someone, they say it's okay, then you probably can. So there's the extent of my legal expertise. I hope I was able to enlighten you. Go ask a lawyer because they'll really be able to tell you. ProfessorMesser.com runs on WordPress. I have used Joomla in the past. It used to run on Joomla. I converted over to WordPress. And I used a theme from a company called SoloStream. The theme, in fact, I'll show you on SoloStream. SoloStream has some great themes for WordPress, so you can sort of spin up a website really quickly. And I guess I could give you an affiliate code for this, but I'm just not gonna. So I'll just show you what I do. They have tons of themes. So let's demonstrate this theme. This theme should look familiar. So here's a theme called WP Clear. And here it is. And this is the theme I use. It does look kind of different on this site, I will have to say, because I've done a lot of customization to mine. But that's basically it. You can kind of see I've changed some of the typefaces and things, but it's the same basic structure. There's the bottom. It looks just like Professor Messer in many ways. This happens to be just a standard template, and I kind of tweaked it to work through that. And the folks at SoloStream are great for support. I've had lots of questions, and they're able to answer them and point me to the right file. I'll change the PHP, and we're good to go. Very, very useful to have that. So a lot of the graphics I have someone else handle, or I have I've gotten the graphics through a subscription to a stock photo, and that's worked great. WordPress is very scalable. It's very supported in the industry, so it's one that it's the main reason I left Drupal and went to, not Drupal, Joomla. I left Joomla and went to WordPress is because WordPress has so many more people supporting it with so many more plugins and so much more capabilities to have that there. And of course, there's a lot more things behind the scenes and integrations that I've done with the website because I have different software that I run there, specific requirements for the membership, and there's a lot of things there to be able to do that. So some of it's written by me and most of it's written, most of it's all WordPress. Some of it I tweak, I customize based on the theme. So that should help give you an idea. If you want to know more, you can send me an email. I'll talk about it till the cows come home. It's boring. Is there a reason I don't use DRM for my hosted files? Aren't I worried about piracy? Everyone's worried about piracy, but guess what? You can't do anything about it. You can even put DRM on your hosted files. It still doesn't stop the piracy. So very early on in the process of building this company, building out the business model and deciding what I wanted to do, that was a big decision. Was, do I create some type of digital rights management and implement a digital rights management system for my videos and for my PDF files and for anything else that I would want to create for the MP3s? And I looked at and evaluated a number of DRM systems because there is no one single way to do DRM. There are many different ways to do DRM. And it was a big thing to go through. And I tried all of them and they all were just, they're lousy. It was just a barrier between you and the training content. And at the end of the day, I could spend many thousands of dollars to implement a DRM system that the guys who wanted the material would just crack anyway. And then it would be on many different distribution sources on the internet. And that, what good is that? Why would I go through this big process of making it harder for you when at the end of the day, it doesn't actually accomplish what I need it to accomplish? That's stupid. That's like hitting yourself with a hammer and then thinking how great it is once you stop hitting yourself. Well, it would have been great if you just didn't hit yourself to begin with. So I just didn't hit myself to begin with. And people who create content are very wrapped up in DRM. They're very concerned about DRM. And I get it. I understand. And there is a concern there. But everybody needs to make their own decisions. Everybody who's a content creator needs to make their own decisions about DRM. My decision was that I can't stop it. Therefore, we're just going to go with this. And the people who are going to copy are going to copy it. And the people that are not going to copy it and pay for it are going to pay for it. And we're going to see how this goes. And my goal is to give you added value and make you understand that when you buy course notes from me, that it has a dramatic impact on keeping my website going. It's incredibly important. And when you buy my courses, you're getting a value with that. And I'm not charging so much that you feel like it's not worth it. Those are the things I think about all the time. If it didn't work, we would have had to do something else. We would have had to use DRM, or we would have had to use a different way to distribute the product. But I felt that giving you, for instance, a set of course notes that you could then put on all of your mobile devices, at your computer, on your mobile phone, on your tablet, so no matter where you were, you would be able to study for your certification. It matched the goal of getting you a job or getting you a better job. So again, everything comes back to that. So by making it accessible to you, I'm accomplishing the main mission of my business. Now, if it turned out that it wasn't profitable, or that I was finding that the pirating of the product was having a detrimental effect on revenue, then I would have had to revisit that. But I have found that overall, people would like to help you do things. They like the product. They want to see the company do well, and they help contribute to what we're doing. And so far that's worked. I think the vast majority of people, it's that way. And I try to price things so it's accessible. So you're not thinking that you have to take out a loan just to get a course notes. Make it something that everybody can help contribute and keep things going. And it's worked. So far, so good. So I think it works out fine. Can I do a one-off live stream once a month? What would the one-off live stream be? I have many different live events that I would like to do. I have a large list of it. Like I said, I have more things in my list that I would want to do that I will ever be able to get to do. And I have an idea for a once a week show, if you will, that has certain topics associated with it. But I'm interested in hearing from any of you. What are the topics you would like to hear about? What would you like to do? If I sat down on a live stream and I just flipped the camera on once a week, what would that be? There's a million things I could do. And I've thought about what these things would be and when it would be on. Because you have to think about what would you be talking about? Who would you be talking to? Which also dictates when during the day you would do it. Because right now, I'm able to talk to people in Europe and I'm able to talk to people on the West Coast and nobody's really asleep yet. You know what I mean? We've got at least part of the day still with us on both sides. So I can't really do it first thing in the morning or California won't be awake. I really can't do it at 8 o'clock at night or Europe will be asleep. And for some reason, Australia is always awake. I don't know what that's about. I don't know. What is it with one of the coolest places in the world? They're just always there. Tap dance, that's an idea. I have no real skill in that. And I would probably bet that it would have very low viewership, but I'd be willing to give it a shot. Sure. The skills that I have outside of this room are limited. So there's only so much you're really going to be able to get from me. I'm pretty good with a screwdriver. What else? Outside this room, I've got a pretty good season in Diablo going. That's not really outside this room though, is it? Something outside the room. Nope. There's really nothing I can do. That's it. We're done. You've seen everything of value that I could possibly provide to you. That's it. This is it. If you need something in front of a camera, I'm your guy. Otherwise, it's not really going to work out so much. I'll grab my kids. We'll go on a trip. That's about the extent. I'll be a dad. I'm a pretty good dad, I think. I don't know. Ask my kids. They might tell you different. They go, I don't know. What is that? We could do that. I'll tell you what I was thinking though. There is an incredible amount of craziness in our industry. There is a remarkable amount of craziness in our industry. And it bleeds over into the real world, if you will. Even to the point that people who were CEOs of very large companies are now trying to become president. IT CEOs, technology CEOs. There are things happening in IT itself that are remarkable every week. What was the acquisition of the day? There was a big one today that I read just before getting in here. So now I have to go to TechMeme. This is what you do to me. If you aren't on TechMeme, you need to go to techmeme.com. The meme is for memo. It's not really meme like the meme. It really came from Tech Memo, Tech Memorandum. So this is where one of my first places I go for news and trying to figure out here it is. Western Digital bought SanDisk for a mere $19 billion. I could talk for 30 minutes about that. I could talk. Oh, another interesting story this week is the story about the Sun Bank. They're firing people. They're bringing in other people. They're bringing in and outsourcing jobs, and they're effectively firing people. They're laying people off. They're giving them a package, if you will, and the package has in there written very clearly that you'll be available for the next 2 years if we have any questions for you. And we will not compensate you for that if we contact you, and you have to help us because that's part of your package. And boy, the industry kind of bit onto that one kind of hard. So it's stories like that I find remarkable in IT that I could talk about for hours. So I was thinking, a current topic show would be interesting, just to rally around some of these absolutely lunatic stories. And here's another good one. Really? HP, you sold Tipping Point to Trend Micro for $300 million. Even they realized that Tipping Point was an enormous waste of money and dumped them like a 3-foot putt to Trend Micro, where it will then sit and stagnate. That's remarkable. Coming from a direct, my last job was direct right in that particular market. How the mighty really have indeed been sold down the river. Tipping Point, a formerly amazing cutting-edge technology security company that lost its way and ultimately is now just being sold off to whoever would like to have them. Remarkable. Yeah, so there's stuff happening all the time. And I see these stories. I'm like, I'd love to get on just microphone and just jabber for an hour. But what value is that really going to give you, the viewer? Would it? I don't know. And it's one of those that also I have, you have your own ideas about a particular story. I just said some very pointed things about Tipping Point. Some people might be turned off by that. And my goal is to make you training videos. My goal is to be as neutral as possible so that you like what I'm doing. And I also worry that by stating things like I did with Tipping Point, that someone might interpret that in the wrong way and go, he hates Tipping Point. I don't. I have people that I know who work there who I like very much. And I think their product was amazing for its day. But it's interesting what happens in our industry. And I don't want to create any problems there either. Learn to speak Klingon. I think that is an option. I'll just kapla myself right out the door. That won't work for anybody. The Western Digital acquisition is quite remarkable. Buying SanDisk. That really is just two big companies bringing together all their stuff and doing more with Flash. Just much, much more Flash. That's really getting the assets of the company who know how to do Flash really, really well so that they can now take Western Digital to the next level. That's what that's about. That is, I think, going to be an interesting one to watch too. That $19 billion in cash and stock is not an insignificant acquisition, but I'll bet a huge chunk of it was primarily stock. And I wonder how much cash on hand Western Digital has. I bet they've got a bundle. I'm not one that really deals with much of that. Is that really the new name, or you're just saying that's the new name? Because that's not good. Really? And what two companies? Everybody's got to be looking at this then for Western Digital and SanDisk together. That in itself. All right. See, now I'm talking about it again. All right. Focus, people. We're into the second hour, so it's about time to wrap things up anyway, because I've got to get on with my day. I have things to edit and people to bother, and I can't do that if I'm talking here. There is, one moment, there's quite a bit that will be happening over the next number of weeks. I am in the studio every day shooting video or editing video these days because the new A+ certification is out. I know that doesn't apply to the Network Plus side, but I'm here all the time creating those. So I certainly have more things to talk about on study groups. Every week now is a study group until the middle of November. So you've got another 4 or 5 solid weeks now of study groups. So if you show up on a Wednesday at noon Eastern time, there'll be a study group here waiting for you all the way through middle of November timeframe. And of course, I've got the one scheduled. The next Network Plus is going to be on November 11th. My next study group is next Wednesday. So if you happen to be around, it'll be Security Plus, and we'll do that next Wednesday. Again, if you want to contact me anywhere for anything, you just type in professormesser.com/a-thing. So /Twitter, /Facebook, /Google+, /Instagram. Maybe I have a LinkedIn there. Do I have an about? What was the one I did also, now that I'm thinking about it? Do I have an about me? I think I do. There's even an about me somewhere. I don't even know if I have a direct link to it, but you could even find me on the about me side. And then there's other places as well if you want to get your discounted vouchers /vouchers. So it just depends on what you type in and where that's going with those pieces. Again, your 1 hour of free Network Plus training labs you can get at professormesser.com/netlabs. And of course, thanks to you. I would not be able to do this if you didn't show up and answer the questions and answer the things I forget in the chat room and provide me with that view of the world. So I want to thank everyone for attending there as well. That brings us really to the end of yet another study group. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everyone.